Character is king. The modern audience is obsessed with characters, many willing to forgive lackluster storylines and tired worlds when they find a particular cast that scratches that itch. Look no further than the Infinity Saga for proof. The first decade of the MCU had its fair share of stinkers, but people's love for Stark, Rogers, and so many more made them more than willing to overlook those flaws. And that's because, above all else, once we become invested in a character, we want to see their journey through to its very end. And that journey is defined by that character's arc. Character arcs are truly what define the needs and structure of a story, our protagonist being faced with a major obstacle that can only be overcome based on the skills and tools they gathered in their journey. A very straightforward example being the first Thor movie, as Thor's time with Jane on Earth teaches him what it means to truly be worthy of his powers, something he needs to return to Asgard and defeat his scheming brother Loki. At their very core, character arcs are a problem, and as writers, it's our job to assure that characters earn their resolution. How do we do that? Well, how do you find the solution to any major problem? You use steps, procedures that allow you to narrow down the cause of the issue. Writing a character arc is no different. At various points along your hero's journey, they'll encounter obstacles that, when solved, provide them with one of the necessary stepping stones to resolve the major issue. Character arcs can be a complex topic, because even at their simplest form, they can be hard to do right. Which is why I felt the best way to explore character arcs is to do so on a character-by-character basis. And for that purpose, we're going to center our first character arc deep dive on Cobra Kai's Johnny Lawrence. For those that don't know, Cobra Kai is a 6-season sequel series set 30 years after the events of the original Karate Kid movie, and follows that film's antagonist, Johnny Lawrence, as he rebuilds his former dojo, all while facing opposition from our original hero of the story, Daniel LaRusso. I will add here that if you do have Netflix and have yet to check out the series, it's one I highly recommend. While it's certainly campy, Cobra Kai is a series about kids doing karate, meaning they don't have the same stakes as your typical action flick, their success being centered around the way they handled the journey of their characters, making Cobra Kai a great learning tool for us aspiring writers. But back to the point of the video, we should first identify what Johnny's goal actually is.
Cobra Kai is about strength. If you're not strong on the inside, you can't be strong on the outside. And right now, you're all weak. And I know that, because I was you. Just like a cobra, I had to shed my loser skin to find my true power. And you guys will too.
Johnny's taking kids that have taken life's hits and teaching them to flip the script. The problem? Johnny's teaching power without responsibility. The behavior of Hawk and Miguel at the tournament proving to him he's taken a group of bullied kids and turned them into the bullies. And this is what truly kicks Johnny onto his series-long arc, because despite all his skills, Johnny too was never taught how to balance power and responsibility, leaving him powerless when it comes to correcting the behaviors of his students. And it's here that we've identified the first major hurdle of Johnny's journey. He wants to teach his students to stick up for themselves, but he doesn't have the proper ability to help them balance when they should and shouldn't strike. So seasons 2 and 3 take Johnny on a journey to learn just that, starting with him working from within the Cobra Kai dojo to make things right, and later forming his own dojo when his former sensei corrupts his teachings and his students. From this point, we can highlight 3 major steps in Johnny's arc. Johnny recognizes the flaw of his teachings via his students' actions. Johnny works to break down some of his old teachings in an effort to correct his students' behaviors. Johnny breaks away from his former dojo and sensei in an effort to teach his students right and wrong, while standing against the sensei that once led him astray. By season 3, Johnny's already on the right path. He identified the problem and has taken steps to overcome it. But Johnny's still plagued by one key flaw. He'd never been properly taught how to balance the time to strike and the time not to. He knows there's right and wrong, but finds it isn't all that easy to teach. But see, character arcs aren't a single character striking out against the world. A character's arc is influenced by those around them. And while Johnny Lawrence may not be able to teach balance on his own, he just so happens to know someone whose life is all about balance. And that someone is none other than Johnny's karate rival, Daniel LaRusso. Much like Johnny, Daniel too has his own lessons to learn throughout the series. And while early seasons saw the pair more at odds, the arcs of Johnny and Daniel continue to intersect and influence each other from episode 1 all the way to the finale. And again, much like Johnny, Daniel too needs to find balance. But where Johnny needs balance to help him overcome an issue he's facing with his students, Daniel needs balance to help him overcome his own complexes and view of Cobra Kai from 30 years ago. Where Johnny's first obstacle was identifying how his teachings negatively impacted the behaviors of his students, Daniel's first hurdle was making peace with the fact that he lived too far into the past. As Cobra Kai's reopening immediately had him treating Johnny like he was the same bully all over again, even if Johnny did have his fair share of blame in that. Daniel LaRusso had to let the past be the past. His ability to do so, putting him and Johnny in the right place to finally unite at the close of the 3rd season. Something that's important to their students and themselves, is Johnny and Daniel lived their lives from opposing viewpoints. Johnny was the offensive strike first kind of guy, while Daniel followed the defensive strike last philosophy. So as you could guess, the next step was to learn each other's styles. Not just so they could use each other's forms of karate, but so they could understand and embrace each other's way of life. But embracing opposing views isn't always easy, and leads to conflict. Something important to consider on a hero's journey is belief. People don't change overnight. Even those looking to change will have hiccups. Characters are allowed to have points of weakness, points where they reopen old wounds or repeat familiar mistakes. But it's vital to your character's arc to ensure that even as past behaviors come back to haunt them, they never lose the progress they've made, lest you end up with another Captain Jack Sparrow, who's notorious for reliving the same character arc through all 5 movies. Johnny Lawrence is a character that slips quite a bit, but little tells remain to assure us that he hasn't lost his way, such as how despite all his antics at the start of Season 3, he's still very much worried for the sake of Miguel, his student, and Robbie, his son. Or how despite his constant fighting with Daniel, he can acknowledge his own faults. Johnny was regularly the one starting their fights, which makes it ironic that when the time came for them to throw down over who controlled the kids' training, it was the defensive Daniel choosing the route to fight, while the usually offensive Johnny had come to his senses and realized they shouldn't, showing how they continued to affect one another without realizing it. And this was what made the inclusion of John Kreese vital. Up until now, Johnny and Daniel had been their own worst enemies. They've spent a good deal of time fighting one another, but all that stemmed from their inability to move past a grudge from 30 years ago. While John Kreese had been stirring the pot for some time, Season 4's Dojo War presents both our heroes with an obstacle they must overcome, and teaches a lesson that could only be learned with a true antagonistic force bearing down upon them, that their individual styles, while strong, are far stronger when used together, and had it not been for a little cheating, Cobra Kai may have ended with this very tournament. When it comes to a story about balance and redemption, we need to see how the unbalanced lifestyle negatively impacted our hero. And what better way to do that than to introduce the troubled son our protagonist left behind? Robbie Keane serves as Johnny's longest standing antagonist, as he first teamed with Daniel to take down Johnny's Cobra Kai. And once Johnny finally woke up to Kreese's bullshit and teamed with Daniel, Robbie flipped sides and teamed with Kreese and Cobra Kai. There's a number of different arcs that Robbie undergoes throughout the series, but the one most important to our purposes is the arc he undergoes within the show's 4th season. For a bit of broad context, Robbie is used to represent the worst of Johnny, often serving as the consequence to all the bad actions Johnny's committed before the start of the series. A large portion of what Robbie faces is to show the absolute worst case for Johnny, and due to his failings as a father, much of Robbie's wrong turns are on him. Or at least, that's how Johnny feels. But on to Robbie's Season 4 arc. By this point, Robbie's gone full Revenge of the Sith on us.
I had a hard enough time beating him when he was on the good side of the Force. Now that he's gone all Sith, I feel like a helpless Jedi youngling about to get slaughtered.
But there's one tiny level of good that remains, and that is brought back via his mentorship of Kenny Payne, a middle school boy being tormented for his hobbies and interests. So Robbie did just as Johnny had done for Miguel. He brought Kenny into Cobra Kai and taught him to defend himself. And much like his father, He did so without being able to properly mentor Kenny in how to responsibly use the power he'd been given. Yet again, we find a character with good intentions that's been left powerless to correct the damage they've done. But there is one person Robbie knows that's overcome this already. The resolution of the long-standing feud between father and son at the conclusion of the show's 4th season served as one of the most powerful acknowledgments of Johnny's arc. Johnny Lawrence had never been the man his son felt he could turn to, but his time as a sensei and time spent with Daniel have changed him. And now, Johnny has earned the trust of his son, as he's become a man capable of setting things right. Season 5 is where Johnny's newfound balance truly shines. He's fixed the broken pieces in his life. He got his son back, is starting a new family, and above all, came ready to face any challenge regardless of his past. Where the prospect of a wife and kids at home once terrified him, it's become a newfound strength. Seeing Johnny start a family, get his son back, and make good with his former rival may seem the perfect end to his arc. And it very well could have been. But there was one thing missing from Johnny's story that needed to be addressed. Remember, Johnny's goal was to teach kids how to throw back the shots life threw. He wanted to take the losers of the world and make them find the winner locked deep inside themselves, like he had done for him in his youth, like he was able to do for Miguel. In order to fully understand Johnny's arc, we need to talk about the character most integral to it, Miguel Diaz. Despite Johnny's ill temper, Twitter cancelable rants, and overall attitude, Miguel never walked away, seeing the very best in his sensei and forming a bond that changed the trajectory of Johnny's life forever. Miguel worked as an interesting character, as while he had a lot to learn from Johnny about both karate and confidence, he also had a lot to teach. As much of what made Johnny the man he was by the end of the series finale came from his time with Miguel. His good heart and constant ability to center Johnny was what made his turn into an asshole so jarring, and likely what shook Johnny most. Sure, Hawk and Aisha's own issues were likely aggravating, but seeing it from Miguel, someone he knew was bound to be better than him, became a great way for Johnny to identify the problems with his teachings. And Miguel continued to push him, challenging him to start Eagle Fang and take the battle to Kreese, where they struggled side by side to right the wrongs of the dojo they'd resurrected. Where Robbie Keane served as the consequence for all of Johnny's past atrocities, Miguel Diaz was the reminder of all the good he'd done, and all the good he could do, which is what brought Cobra Kai full circle. Miguel Diaz proved time and time again that Johnny Lawrence was meant to be a sensei, because he made a serious impact on these kids' lives. And so, Cobra Kai must end by proving that Johnny can be the teacher he set out to be. And he accomplishes this by teaching the balance and discipline that he learned throughout all 6 seasons. When Johnny first opened his dojo, he merely copied the motto he grew up with. But when Johnny ends the series, he understands the motto.
No mercy. Means not being Mr. Nice Guy. It's the hardest one to understand. But the fact is, if you're too nice, the world's gonna walk all over you.
Johnny's arc is an arc that takes him full circle, bringing him right back to the point he started, only this time, he has the experience gained through 65 episodes of storytelling to back him, giving him answers to questions that once plagued him. Cobra Kai sought to teach Johnny redemption and balance, and he found it. Through overcoming his tumultuous relationship with Robbie, making things right with his former karate rival, and finding peace with the man that caused it all. Johnny's arc serves as the main function of Cobra Kai's story, but the arcs of Daniel, Kreese, Robbie, Miguel, and many more build out his story, and prove invaluable to his growth. There are all sorts of character arcs in writing, and with how character-driven modern audiences are, understanding and nailing the character arc may be one of the greatest hurdles to define your success. Our look into Cobra Kai and Johnny Lawrence helped build upon the basics, and give us a look into the idea of a full-circle character arc. And as time goes on, we'll try focusing on different characters with different types of character arcs, also that we can get a better sense of the arcs out there, and a better sense for writing the characters that carry our stories.